And now we have time for one more story from my book, ZIG ZAG ZOG. And this one is called The Mysterious Disappearance of Big Benny Bullfrog. One day I went out to the pond at the back of our house to play with my pet bullfrog, Big Benny, but there was no Benny anywhere. I looked under all the usual rocks that he would hide under, but there was no Benny anywhere. I trudged through all the bulrushes along the pond, but there was no Benny anywhere. Finally, I waded all the way across the pond to see if he was hiding under a water lily leaf, but there was no Benny anywhere. I asked Mrs. Rush, the gardener next door, if she had seen Benny anywhere. "Saw him hop over your back fence about an hour ago," she said, and then she began to rake up the leaves in her backyard to see if we could see any sign of Benny. But there was no Benny anywhere. Not a croak, not a peep, no Benny anywhere. So I thought I should look further afield. I climbed over Mrs. Rush's back fence and checked all along Sugar Hill Tree Lane to see if Benny was hiding in a stray puddle, but there was no Benny anywhere. So I figured that Benny must have decided that he wanted to go for an explore and have a little adventure all on his own without me. I was a bit hurt that he hadn't waited for me, but I had noticed in the past that bullfrogs can get very impatient when they want to do something. I wondered for a moment whether Big Benny had got lonely, but I decided that he couldn't be lonely because, after all, he has me. And then it struck me like a bolt of lightning during a rainstorm. I bet Big Benny has hopped off down to Gingerbread Lane, I thought. There's all those sweet grannies living in all those gingerbread houses down Gingerbread Lane. I bet they have all sorts of titbits that bullfrogs like Benny love to eat. And I bet Benny has worked that out, and he's been waiting for just the right time to rock off by himself to explore Gingerbread Lane and croak a good morning to all those Gingerbread Lane grannies in their gingerbread houses. So I left Sugar Hill Tree Lane. There weren't any puddles there anyway. I slid under the big peppercorn tree at the beginning of Gingerbread Lane. Just to be sure, I thought I should start looking for Benny right under that peppercorn tree. A big tree like that has lots of big juicy roots that mushrooms and toadstools love to pop up between. I half expected to see Big Benny waiting for me sitting up high on a toadstool or a big dusty mushroom. But though I looked all over the ground and in between the peppercorn tree roots, there was no Benny anywhere. So I figured that I would have to do a house-to-house search for Benny and knock on every door of every gingerbread house in Gingerbread Lane. I fronted up to the first house, which was painted in about 10 different shades of green. Now I reckon that Benny would be bound to be here because he would recognise the colour as the same as he was. So I knocked real hard on the wooden door knocker. It was in the shape of a frog, so I was pretty optimistic that I would be able to find my missing Benny. The granny who came to the door was Granny Green, and she was grateful to greet me, but she wasn't keeping my Benny in her green gingerbread house anywhere. She did tell me, though, that she had seen a great big green frog galloping down Gingerbread Lane first thing this morning. Then Granny Green gave me some green grapes, but I didn't dally because I wanted to get after my missing bullfrog. The second gingerbread house I knocked on was painted about 11 shades of yellow. Granny Yelland opened her door with a great big grin and offered me some lemonade. I drank it quickly as she was telling me that she had seen a big bullfrog barrelling down Gingerbread Lane as she went out to collect her bottle of milk this morning. As I was walking up the front path of the third gingerbread house, I noticed a small pond in the front yard and I could hear some croaking. At last, I thought, that will be Benny my bullfrog. But as I got closer, I could see that it was just a family of familiar frogs, and though I looked all around the pond, there was no Benny anywhere. That gingerbread house was blue, about 17 shades of blue, and I was feeling pretty blue myself. I still had not found my lost Benny. The granny who opened the door was Granny Glue, and she had on odd shoes. She said that she'd put her shoes on in a hurry this morning as she'd been woken up by a loud bullfrog croaking on her front veranda. But when she opened the door, he had leapt over her front fence and bounced off further down Gingerbread Lane. Granny Glue gave me some sweet blueberry juice, and I sipped it slowly as I walked to the next gingerbread house on Gingerbread Lane. The fourth house I knocked on was painted 8 different shades of pink, I think. I'm finding it hard to remember. Granny Spink answered my knock, and before I could say a word she offered me another drink, pink lemonade, but I was not thirsty, so I said, "No thanks, Granny Spink, I don't need a drink." Granny Spink sat down for a think about whether she'd seen Big Benny Bullfrog that morning, and then she remembered that she'd heard his call, but she hadn't actually seen him at all. The door at the next house I knocked on was painted like the ocean. I felt like I was underwater. It was owned by Granny Slaughter and her grown-up daughter. I didn't want to, but I thought I ought to when they offered me a saucer of seaweed tea. I got dizzy as I drank it, as the wind was making shadows on the wall, and it looked as if the house was rocking, just like on a boat. Granny Slaughter's daughter said she'd like to have a bullfrog like Benny, and if I ever wanted to give him up, she would look after him. But first I had to find him, and Granny Slaughter and Granny Slaughter's daughter hadn't seen Big Benny. Not today, not yesterday, not ever. There was no Benny anywhere. So I put down the seaweed tea and went back out to Gingerbread Lane to look for my missing bullfrog. Just then a cat came wandering down Gingerbread Lane. It was the biggest cat I had ever seen. It was a gingery colour with the brightest green eyes. It sort of looked at me as if it knew I was looking for Benny. And then I started to worry in case that big ginger cat had eaten him. I just couldn't remember if cats ate bullfrogs, but looking at that cat, I reckoned that it could eat pretty much whatever it wanted to eat. The next door I knocked on in Gingerbread Lane was painted a juicy shade of peach. It was opened by Granny Leach. She said she'd just come back from the beach. She asked me how high I could reach, because she wanted me to pick her a peach off her peach tree, and she said I could also have a peach as I had such a long reach. Her gingerbread house was painted in 11 shades of peach, with window trims in apricot. She had a very fruity laugh, which she let go with a howl as I told her about my lost Benny. Granny Leach thought I should teach Big Benny Bullfrog how to come home by himself after he had been for a bounding wander. Suddenly I saw a leech crawling down along her front veranda, and I got such a fright I couldn't speak. Granny Leach sprinkled the leech with salt from the beach, and it curled up in a ball out of reach. Granny Leach made a little speech about bullfrogs, but she hadn't seen my Benny, so I thanked her for the peach, and I went next door to the next gingerbread house in Gingerbread Lane. The purple hit me as soon as I went through the gate. This cottage was like a luminous rainbow. It was painted in so many shades of purple. There was a turtle in the door knocker which was painted cinnamon and lavender. I looked around, but there was no Benny anywhere. Granny Turple answered the door. She was dressed all in purple too, of a darkish hue. Even her hair was purple, and she had a lavender blue eyeglass on her left eye. She said she needed it to see her purple turtle who escaped from his aquarium if she wasn't careful. As soon as I saw Granny Turple's purple aquarium, I got my hopes up that I would find Big Benny right there. But there was no Benny anywhere. Granny Turple said she hadn't seen Big Benny Bullfrog, and then her purple turtle started to burble as it tried to climb out of her aquarium. Granny Turple offered me some purple circle cake as she went after her escaping purple turtle, but I could see that she was busy with her escaping purple turtle, so I said, "No thanks, Granny Turple," and I left her purple circle cake in her purple cottage so I could continue my search. I continued down Gingerbread Lane, and the next gingerbread cottage I knocked on was Fire Engine Red, and the bright red door knocker was shaped like a fire hydrant. There was a red eye watching me through the peephole, and someone said, "Who's there?" I told them it was me and that I was looking for my Big Benny Bullfrog. Slowly the Fire Engine Red door swung open. Granny Sledge peered at me as if she couldn't see me. When I told her again who I was, she said, "Come in, Fred, I've just made your bed." And then she offered me a piece of cinnamon sugared bread. It was delicious. So then Granny Sledge said, "Have some more, Fred." So I did. I shouldn't have led her to believe I was Fred, but I didn't want to disappoint her if she was expecting Fred. And then Granny Sledge went to bed, so I fled. I could tell there was no Benny anywhere. When I knocked on the next gingerbread house in Gingerbread Lane, Granny Brown answered the door still in her nightgown. Her house was painted in 14 shades of brown, but I couldn't see inside because the blinds were all down. Granny Brown's face was wearing a frown when I told her I was looking for Big Benny, but then she told me to sit down while she got me some chocolatey brown chocolate cookies. They were so delicious I almost forgot why I was there. Granny Brown said she was off to town and that she would look around on her way to town to see if she could see my Benny anywhere around. Her face lost its frown and she began to smile as she showed me around her brown gingerbread cottage, but there was no Benny anywhere. The next gingerbread cottage in Gingerbread Lane I visited was painted in 16 shades of crimson. It glowed like a sunset as I knocked on the crimsony door knocker, which was shaped like Davy Jones' locker. Granny Simpson opened the door. She'd been waxing her floor, so she sat me down outdoors while I poured out my story about the loss of Big Benny Bullfrog and my search for him. Granny Simpson gave me some Stimpsons and some Stilton cheese. I love the Stimpsons as I love apples, but I wasn't too pleased with the cheese. And then she began to sneeze and wheeze. Between sneezes and wheezes, Granny Simpson said she hadn't seen Big Benny Bullfrog anywhere. So I continued on my search down Gingerbread Lane. Granny Rome answered my knock with armfuls of foam. She said she was just doing her dishes and offered me some Swiss roll cake on a see-through plate. By this time I was hungry, so I ate it right down as I looked around Granny Rome's home. It was painted in about 27 shades of bone. Granny Rome liked water, I could see. She had several small aquariums inside her gingerbread lane cottage and a very big one outside in the garden. I was hopeful that Benny had hopped right into her garden pond because I couldn't see him in any of the indoor aquariums. And then I heard him, just as I was putting the see-through plate in the sink. Sure enough, Big Benny leapt right out of Granny Rome's outdoor aquarium, and then he disappeared under a giant green leaf. Uh-oh, I thought. I hope I haven't lost him just as I found him. So I rushed outside and darted over to the leaf. I lifted it up carefully, and sure enough, there he was in all his Big Benny Bullfrog glory. But he wasn't alone. Just under the leaf next to him I could see another frog, and 3 tiny little grass-green frogs. Big Benny looked at me, and then he looked at his frog family as if he'd been waiting to introduce them to me. So I said, "Hello, Benny. Hello, Mrs. Frog. Hello, little frogs." And then I walked all the way back up Gingerbread Lane. I knew that Big Benny would come home to his pond when he was ready. So I've been reading you stories from my new book, Zig Zag Zog, and you can check out all my books on my website, which is www.g'daysally.com. This is the G'day Sally Show. And the G'day Sally Show is brought to you by Noah Noah. You know, Hawaii is a microcosm of the world with people here from all over the world. And Noah Noah Hawaii is a microcosm of the traditional arts of the world with beautiful patterns from many countries. They've been in business for 38 years with wonderful Hawaii-designed batik clothing. Their hand-dyed and handmade clothes have patterns that are based on traditional kapa and tapa designs from Hawaii, Polynesia, Micronesia, Indonesia, even New Zealand and Africa. So check out all of the wonderful items that Noah Noah has on their website, which is www.noahnoahhawaii.com. So I'll be back next week, so bye for now.